It pains me to think, and I deeply regret, that I may have unknowingly assisted Epstein in any way.
One of the key men, a part of Jeffrey Epstein's inner circle, his accountant, his money man, sat for an hours-long deposition in front of the House Oversight Committee. And now we have the actual video of it. You will see for yourself his answers that he gave to whether or not he knew about what Epstein was accused of doing. Why did he stay working for this guy for so long? You're going to be able to judge his credibility with your own eyes. Let's get to it. Welcome to Sidebar, presented by Law and Crime. I'm Jesse Weber. Okay, super quick, I got some really exciting news to share with you right now. So we have spent so much time together here at Law and Crime obsessing over every wild twist and late night case that we wanted to find a way to get you even closer to the action. So what do? We finally launched Law and Crime Plus. This is your new go-to spot for thousands of hours of commercial-free episodes and exclusive case files, by the way, where you can dive into the evidence yourself. We really built this for the community of people who stay up late analyzing every detail while waiting for a verdict. So it's just as much as your space as it is ours. So go ahead, download the app, check out the features, let us know what you think. You can head on over to lawandcrimeplus.com today to snag our limited time deal of just $3.99 a month or $40.99 for the year. Now, we previously told you here on Sidebar about the depositions of two of Jeffrey Epstein's right-hand men, his accountant Richard Kahn and his lawyer Darren Indyke. But we didn't have the videos. Now we do. Now we have the videos of their depositions. They have been released, and we are getting a much better picture of how they responded to sometimes kind of fiery questions from the House Oversight Committee that's investigating Epstein and his inner workings and his dealings to see whether or not anyone else has been connected, whether or not anyone else should be investigated. And I've said this before, I'll say it again. Seeing somebody testify is very different than reading the transcript. This is Law and Crime. Why do you think we cover these trials, okay? Actually watching a witness testify can tell you so much. You can judge credibility in a whole other way. And by the way, when you're looking at this deposition, he's under oath. Indyke is under oath. So let's not forget that. Why do I say that? Because if the committee believes that they were lying, they can refer the matter, a perjury charge, to the Department of Justice to prosecute. Separate question about whether or not they would actually do that. I'll talk about that a little bit later. But these are men who worked with Jeffrey Epstein for decades, including when he pled guilty in Florida in connection with those state charges, solicitation of prostitution involving a minor back in 2008, the sweetheart deal. So they were with him through his arrest, they were with him through his confinement, and they were with him up until his federal sex trafficking trial. By the way, they served as co-executors of his estate after Epstein was found dead in his jail cell in 2019. You're going to hear Richard Kahn talk about what it was like to do that. But to hear them tell it, the pair barely knew this guy. But what did they know exactly, right? That's the question. Could they be lying, misleading to protect themselves when maybe they say they didn't have any knowledge about what Epstein was accused of doing? Is it possible they were, I don't know, wearing the darkest of rose-colored glasses all the time? Or were they really shielded from what Epstein was doing and what he was accused of doing? Were they really separated? By all accounts, they didn't have a social relationship with him per se, more professional relationship, but we're going to play some of the biggest moments from the depositions, let you decide. Now, this video, we're only going to focus on Richard Kahn, the accountant. We're going to save his lawyer, Darren Indyke, for another day because there is just too much Kahn video that we got to go through, okay? And yes, this is Epstein's money man, managed his financial affairs, handling wire transfers, signing checks, filing taxes, distributing money on Epstein's behalf. And by the way, remember when Epstein was charged with sex trafficking of minors? Sex trafficking in and of itself, there is kind of a financial component, right? The idea usually is that you're providing some benefit, something of value to these victims to ultimately be abused, for them to engage in commercial sex acts, whether it's flying them or giving them gifts or paying for things. I mean, remember the Diddy case was a lot about this. Sure, this is a little bit different, but you would imagine that looking at the money, seeing the money trail could be a big part of the case. At least that's what you have to suspect. And remember, Epstein was reportedly worth hundreds of millions of dollars when he died. So there is a lot to keep track of here. And it makes sense that Richard Kahn's name appears more than 50,000 times in the DOJ's Epstein files library. So let's talk about this, okay? Let's go through the video. And by the way, this was a closed-door deposition. You don't usually see the video being released, but this is an unusual case where transparency matters. Okay, so during his opening statement to the committee, Kahn insisted he didn't know about Epstein's alleged crimes, that the one bit of misconduct he did know about, right, that precipitated the state charges in Florida, the accusation, again, that he had been involved with a minor, it was a mistake that Epstein swore to never make again.
In the years that I provided outside accounting and bookkeeping services for Jeffrey Epstein, I was not aware of the terrible and unforgivable things that he did to women and girls. My relationship with Epstein was strictly on a professional level. We did not interact socially, and I never attended any of his parties or his social functions. While Epstein was alive, I never observed any sexual abuse or trafficking of women and never received a complaint, either by one of Epstein's victims or anyone else, of such abuse or trafficking. Epstein told me that his 2006 arrest was a mistake, that he did not know the woman was underage, and that nothing like that would happen again. I believed him at the time and never saw what appeared to be a minor in his presence. Had I learned of any of his horrific behavior, I would have quit work immediately.
Now, again, we know that Epstein pled guilty to state charges to avoid the more serious federal charges, but maybe Kahn really had no more knowledge about the extent of that investigation or what potential evidence there was against Epstein should that deal have not been worked out. Now, members of the committee, they asked Kahn to go into more detail about why he would continue to work for a man who had been convicted of a sex crime that involved a child.
I think you briefly touched on this, but after learning of Mr. Epstein's legal troubles, you, of course, ultimately decided to continue your employment with Mr. Epstein. Did you ever consider leaving or discuss leaving your employment?
Yes, 100%. I apologize for not alluding to that earlier. I, without a doubt, question leaving him. And in hindsight, I regret that I relied on Epstein's word that this would never happen again. And I believe at the time we were in the middle of a financial crisis and I had a family to support. So I made the wrong decision in working for him, because I later learned as co-executor that Epstein continued to abuse hundreds of minors and adults. So I made an improper decision.
And you briefly, I think, touched on this before, obviously knowing that you started in 2005 and before Mr. Epstein formally came to you with his legal troubles in 2008. Did you suspect that he was ever trafficking women, sex trafficking women, or abusing women or girls in any way?
No, I never suspected any of that.
Did anyone in Mr. Epstein's orbit ever express concern to you about Mr. Epstein and his dealings with women before his 2008 conviction?
Before his 2008 conviction, I never saw minors in the presence of Epstein. On my visits every 3 weeks when Epstein was in town, occasionally I saw assistants, but I never saw anything that looked improper. In addition, no woman has ever come to me and said that she was in danger, that she was being sexually abused or sexually trafficked.
And just so that the record is clear, saw no minors, no women outside of, or I'm sorry, no minors or girls present with Mr. Epstein at any time.
No, I'm not saying that I never saw minors. I'm saying, let me rephrase that. I never saw minors in Epstein's presence. Period, correct. Yes, that's what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that occasionally when Epstein was in the office, I did see his assistants, and no one ever approached me, communicated with me, and said that they were in danger or that they were being sexually abused or trafficked by Epstein.
Is it fair to say the assistants were adult females?
Correct, yes.
When did you become aware that Mr. Epstein had to register as a sex offender following his arrest and incarceration in 2008?
I believe I became aware, I assume, after he was to be released from jail.
And who did you learn that from?
I learned that from his attorney, Darren Endyke.
Did anyone check the date of births of any employees on the payroll?
When we received, I usually would hand out a employment package to new employees, and I would receive their information with date of birth. And if they were on the insurance plan, I would receive their personal information as well. In addition, when we prepared gift tax returns, if Epstein was reporting a taxable gift, we were required to know that individual's date of birth.
Would you verify those individuals' date of births?
In New York State, I believe that you're required to have working papers from either your school or from your parents if you're a minor. I never saw any working papers in New York, so I knew there were no minors that were working for Epstein on his payroll. And for the dates of birth, when we saw the gifts, there was nothing, that was alarming that stood out. So when you say, did I ever verify them? I wasn't in tune, saying was every date making sure it was a minor, but I never saw a date of birth that was a minor, with the exception of potentially one gift that was to what I believe was a family friend of Epstein's.
And who was that family friend of Epstein's?
Epstein made gifts to, she was reported on his gift tax returns.
And do you recall what that gift was at the time? That she was a minor?
Yeah, I believe he purchased for her gift cards, American Express gift cards.
Do you know how much value was for those gift cards?
Probably somewhere in the $10,000 to $15,000 range.
And just to be clear about something, no one has accused Kahn or Indike of directly participating or engaging in alleged sex abuse or trafficking. They have been accused in litigation of enabling Epstein, okay? But the committee members, they pressed him about whether anything suspicious ever came up in documentation or ledgers for Epstein or anyone else that Kahn might have provided accounting services for, including Epstein's apparent girlfriend when he died, Karina Shuliak. What did he say?
Did you ever see any transactions that you found alarming or found suspicious in any way?
I never saw a transaction in Epstein's books and records that said payment for sex, or I don't recall ever seeing any payments that said, for massages. So there was never anything in his ledger that alluded to that, if that's what you're asking.
And just to follow up to that, I'm not referring just to sex trafficking, but anything illegal, not just sex trafficking.
Not that I'm aware of.
And did you ever provide any financial advice or assistance to any women associated with Jeffrey Epstein, such as tax advice or just any informal financial advice?
About 4 or 5 of Epstein's assistants had asked if I would do a favor and prepare their tax returns.
Do you remember who they were?
I believe it was Karina Shuliak. There might have been 2 others, but those are the names that I recall.
So you mentioned in 2008, you'd heard about the arrest, but by 2019, is that when you started to learn about the extent of his crimes?
When the Miami Herald article came out, it was alarming because there was a lot more depth to what took place in 2008. And at the time, this was the time when we had just gotten dropped by Deutsche Bank.
So after he was dropped by banks, did you help him try to find new firms that would open accounts for him?
When Epstein was dropped by Deutsche Bank, I tried to help Epstein open up cash and brokerage accounts.
Did you ever help him withdraw cash amounts that wouldn't trigger federal reporting, specifically because that amount wouldn't trigger federal reporting?
I never had signatory on any of Epstein's accounts, with the exception of HBRK, which was my company. There was a company, a design company, that I had signatory authority for the sole purpose of processing payroll. I never signed any cash withdrawals from that. And at one point in time, one of his trusts, I had signatory authority, but all of his other accounts, I never had signatory authority until the last 6 months when Epstein was alive.
Now, to me, when I listened to that, it wasn't like a blanket denial that, Epstein never did that, right? Epstein would never be skirting around federal reporting laws. No, just more like, I didn't have sign-off authority. I don't know what he did, right? That seemed to be my take about it. Now, I do want to dive into some of the more salacious and controversial allegations to come out of the Epstein files release. The claims that President Donald Trump had sexually assaulted a teenage girl. Now, remember, this information comes from tips that came into the FBI's National Threat Operations Center, which means there's a lot of secondhand information. There's no corroborating evidence. But you had, quote, redacted, reported an unidentified female friend who was forced to perform on President Trump approximately 35 years ago in New Jersey. The friend told Redacted that she was approximately 13 to 14 years old when this occurred, and the friend allegedly bit President Trump while performing. The friend was allegedly hit in the face after she laughed about biting President Trump. The friend said she was also abused by Epstein. And there was also a note that this tip was apparently sent to the Washington office to conduct an interview. And remember, there was that whole back and forth about missing interviews, and eventually there were interviews that were released by the government. But you have this other one. Online complainant reported she was a victim and witness to a sex trafficking ring at the Trump golf course in Rancho Palos Verdes, California between 1995 and 1996. Complainant reported Ghislaine Maxwell as the madam and broker for sex parties, clients of whom included Epstein, Robin Leach, and Donald Trump. Complainant reported participating in orgies and that some girls went missing, rumored to have been murdered and buried at the facility. Complainant reported being threatened by Trump's then head of security, that if she ever talked of what went on there or who she saw, she would end up as fertilizer for the back nine holes. But there's a note there too. Complainant was spoken to and deemed not credible. Additional research showed 3 separate incidents involving police, which requested in mandatory psychiatric evaluations. Okay, I say all that to go back to Kahn. So Richard Kahn was involved in apparently paying out settlements from the Epstein Victims Compensation Fund, which means, in a way, he should have inside knowledge of some of the claims these women made, right? Well, Jane Doe number 4, so a woman who claims that President Trump assaulted her when she was a teenager, was reportedly paid a settlement from that fund. Now, Kahn arguably has kind of been wish-washy on his statements about that. Why do I say that? This is what he said during a back and forth with Representative Ro Khanna during that March 11th deposition. I want you to listen carefully also to the idea of a release. So you put in language in a document that would restrict the victims from being able to continue to sue other people that were allegedly involved in what Epstein and Maxwell were accused of doing. Just take a look.
Is it true that Jane Doe 4, the citation is Doe versus Jeffrey Epstein, 1:19 CV 07675, Southern District of New York, received a financial settlement directly from the estate, as her attorney has claimed?
I'm sorry, I don't know who Jane Doe 4 is.
She's the person who has been widely described as alleging that President Trump raped or abused her when she was 13 in the 1980s. And her attorney is out there, has said that she received a settlement from the estate.
Congressman, may I just tell him who Jane Doe 4 is, just so
Yes.
it refreshes him?
Okay, I believe I understand who you're referring to. If you don't mind, may you please repeat the question?
Is it true that she received a financial settlement directly from the estate? Her attorney said that she has. I just wanted
I believe that Jane Doe 4 received a settlement via mediation with the estate, I believe in 2025.
And her attorney saying she received that settlement because she was a victim of Epstein and President Trump. Is that accurate?
I don't recall the mediation statement or the lawsuit in particular, but I don't have recollection of President Trump. I know that she alleges that Epstein abused her, but I don't recall President Trump.
Then I guess it would only be the mediation statement that would be.
I believe she filed a lawsuit, so there was a complaint, which I believe is public. So if I'm not speaking correctly, we could look at the complaint and see if she makes that allegation. But I don't recall from the mediation statement that, I don't even actually, now I'm thinking about it, I don't even know if she made a mediation statement. So I don't have any recollection of her making allegations against President Trump.
The last point then, so I just to get on the record, Jane Doe 4 did get a settlement. You don't know anything beyond it, but she was given a settlement. Is it there's some people who've said, oh, this is all a hoax. The survivors obviously say there are over 1,000 survivors. Given your situation, would you say it's fair to say that there are hundreds of women who were abused or raped or trafficked? And would you say that there are more than Epstein and Maxwell that were involved?
I don't agree with the statement that there are 1,000+ survivors. My understanding is that the Epstein Victims Compensation Program gave out awards to 136 women. The estate then settled mediation or individually with another 59 individuals, which I believe is 195. I believe, and there's allegations that maybe there's another 50 women out there in my belief. So I'd say the number is probably somewhere in the 250 range, not 1,000.
And what about, would you say it's fair to say that there were other men involved either in trafficking, raping, abusing, participating in the abuse of these girls other than Maxwell and Epstein?
I can't speak for what other men did. I could only speak as co-executor, what I see in the lawsuits against the estate that I'm now tasked with reading and trying to understand. But I can say to you that in some of the settlements that were made, as well as the Epstein Victims Compensation Program, women were allowed to have carve-outs from their release. And there were a number of carve-outs from both the Epstein Victims Compensation Program and the mediation.
What does that mean?
What the carve-out means, when we set up the Epstein Victims Compensation Program, we set up a very broad release. And the thought process as fiduciaries and co-executors was that we did not want to settle with a woman for her to then turn around and sue another employee or someone who was a contractor or affiliated with the estate. So at the time when we were negotiating the release, David Boies was involved in that conversation, and we, at first he was against a broad release, and when the estate and Jordy Feldman and Ken Feinberg all decided that the estate was going to give out larger rewards because the release was a little broader, he agreed to the release. But what I'm saying is that the carve-out would be if this plaintiff's attorney or if this victim was unsure of whether or not this person was covered by the release. They wanted that name to specifically say, this release does not cover this individual.
So there were other men involved based on that.
I'm not making allegations.
Possibly.
Women wanted to have other names carved out. I'm not making any statements that other men were involved. I'm not aware of what went on. Thank you.
And we'll end the minority round here. We'll go off record.
We'll go back on the record. Mr. Kahn, and it's 1:02 p.m. Mr. Kahn, towards the end of the last hour, there were discussions about the estate settlement fund for victims and survivors of the crimes of Mr. Epstein, and it was mentioned that there were carve-outs for other individuals. Could you please inform us of who those individuals are that were carved out?
Yes. My recollection is that from the Epstein Victims Compensation Program, I'm aware of 2 carve-outs. There may have been a few more, but these are the 2 that I'm aware of. One was Alan Dershowitz, and the other carve-out was Prince Andrew. Regarding the mediation, there were 2 additional carve-outs. One was Leon Black, and the other was Jess Staley.
Okay, but then just one day after that deposition, Kahn had apparently reached back out to the committee attorneys. So on March 13th, the Oversight Committee sent a letter to Kahn asking for clarification, calling out what they said were concerning shifts. Part of that letter reads, quote, on March 12th, 2026, so it's the day after, you represented to Oversight Democratic staff attorneys that contrary to your prior statement during the deposition, the individual identified as Jane Doe 4 did in fact file a claim against the estate, but the claim was denied and no settlement was reached. In a second call on March 12, 2026, you represented to Oversight Democratic staff attorneys that you can no longer stand by your assertion that no settlement was reached with Jane Doe 4. Instead, you stated on this second call that you can neither confirm nor deny whether a settlement was reached with Jane Doe 4. Now, so far it appears Kahn hasn't commented further on that, but I will tell you this much. It does seem being Jeffrey Epstein's accountant was potentially financially lucrative, because this brings up questions of Jeffrey Epstein's estate and him managing the estate, and after all the affairs are done, what his payout would be. And by the way, if any of this ever went to trial, doesn't even have to, you can make this point now, financial incentive. That's the first thing you would cross-examine a witness about, right? Regarding someone's credibility. Question if they knew about and covered up or looked the other way regarding alleged crimes. And when I say probate here, once that happens, once all the affairs are taken care of, there would have been massive payouts to go to people that were managing this, like Epstein's lawyer, Darren Indyke, his girlfriend, Karina Shuliak, Kahn himself. We're talking about tens of millions of dollars each. And the committee members, they questioned Kahn about that.
Yes, I am a beneficiary of the 1953 trust.
And you are among the top 3 beneficiaries in terms of dollar amounts. Is that correct?
I believe I am in the top 3 of beneficiaries, yes.
And specifically, it's my understanding that the trust bequeaths $50 million to Mr. Endyke and $25 million to you. Is that correct?
Yes, I believe that the trust has a bequest to me for $25 million.
I think the question that arises then, given that you described your relationship to Mr. Epstein this morning as strictly professional, why he would leave you a bequest of that size through his trust?
So I was not involved in Epstein's drafting of his will documents. But what I can say is that Epstein asked me to be, I wasn't alive, but I was requested to be his co-executor and co-trustee. I believe that it's likely that I will receive 0 from Epstein's 1953 trust, based on the value of its assets and its remaining obligations. As of the last publicly filed quarterly accounting, the estate had approximately $120 million of assets. Most recently, the estate settled a lawsuit, a class action lawsuit for $35 million, which leaves approximately $85 million. The estate still has, unfortunately, 4 to 5 remaining lawsuits, in addition to the fact that it is burning approximately $10 to $15 million a year in legal fees and other expenses. As far as taking the role as co-executor, that's not a role that anyone would want. I decided to take the role, as I testified earlier, as I thought I'd be best suited to know Epstein's assets and to be able to terminate employees in a respectful and kind fashion. Lastly, being able to compensate victims for all of their harms that they endured by Epstein was my top priority in taking this role, after learning about all the terrible things Epstein did. To go back to your original question, actually, let me just add one more point. Being co-executor has caused tremendous strife for me and my family. The anguish, anxiety, distress is unfathomable. My reputation has suffered what I believe to be irreparable damage that I don't know if I'll ever recover from taking this role. But you asked me the question, why do you think Epstein awarded $25 million to me? I was not involved in the drafting of his documents, but what I can say is that Epstein's estate of approximately $600 million, if his estate was being probated in New York or Florida, and there was no designation of a co-executor fee. Currently, Epstein's will calls for me to receive $250,000 for what will probably amount to 10 years of work. As I just said, I don't believe I will receive anything from Epstein's trust based on the assets and liabilities. I believe that Epstein envisioned me taking this role as co-executor and co-trustee would be many, many years of work. And at the same time, he didn't provide for what would be an executor fee in New York or Florida, which I believe the statutory rate is approximately 2%. So if I was not in Epstein's trust and I was a corporate trustee, I probably would have received an executor fee of $12 million for serving as co-executor and serving as co-trustee. So that could be the only reason why he left me such a large bequest, because if you take away the $12 million, my bequest is not different than many other individuals that are in that trust for $10 million. And lastly, I would just say, other than compensating victims, I would never take on this role again as co-executor.
And this is really interesting too. When they asked Kahn whether he had been contacted by any sort of law enforcement agency about Epstein, he said no. Epstein had apparently been under investigation for years. We've talked about this before, that there were multiple agencies looking at this guy. And this was both at the state and federal levels. So how could they not reach out to the money man? And that seems to be the committee's reaction too.
Have you ever been formally questioned by any government authority in connection with Mr. Epstein?
I've never been questioned by any government authority, although I did receive, I believe, a grand jury subpoena request from the Southern District of New York, and I believe from the U.S. Virgin Islands Department of Justice. I'm not sure what division, but both of the requests were for the same thing. They were asking for Epstein's estate documents. They wanted to see his will and his 1953 trust, and I believe they also asked for prior versions of some of the trusts, which we complied with and provided.
Have you ever been subject to any regulatory action?
No,
Any financial regulatory action?
no.
Yeah, so right there is why people question the government's handling of this Epstein matter, why there's so many questions, why there's so much uncertainty, skepticism, the question whether everyone was fully investigated, whether all the apparent connections were fully probed, whether other charges against anyone else could be brought. I mean, he wasn't even questioned with respect to Ghislaine Maxwell's sex trafficking case, where she was convicted. Now, this was a long deposition, right around 6 hours. And look, we haven't been able to get into absolutely everything, kind of the big parts here, but there is one big question that loomed over this whole proceeding. How could Kahn continue to work for Epstein when he found out about his conviction? Here's what he had to say.
I believe you testified earlier that you had some concerns after Mr. Epstein's legal troubles in 2008 and 2009 when he was imprisoned. You decided to stay employed because you were a new father. There was a financial crisis. Is that accurate to what you testified to today?
In 2008, I trusted Epstein when he told me that it was a mistake that he was with a minor and that it would never happen again. But I still had concerns, and I then evaluated, along with the fact that we were in a financial crisis and I had a young family, and I decided to stay. Yes, that was my testimony.
And after 2009, did your concerns about Jeffrey Epstein end or wane?
Are you referring to the particular time after he was released from prison?
Just after he was released from prison?
After Epstein was released, I could say affirmatively that I never saw a minor. I never saw a woman that was being abused. No woman had ever come to me and saying that she was under distress, that she was being sexually abused or sexually trafficked. I never saw any payments that he made that said they were for sex. I never saw payments that said cash massages. So although Epstein was still doing terrible things that I later learned as co-executor, at that point in time, I did not, during the later years, during 2009 to 19, I did not see any signs until the Miami Herald article that alerted me to me reevaluating potentially leaving employment. There were times during the period of time that I wanted to leave, on my own because I wanted to do something else, but I never saw signs from Epstein, and later learning about the terrible things he did that made me want to leave in the interim.
And after the Miami Herald article came out in, I believe it was November of 2018, why did you not decide to leave then?
At that point, I was, everything was happening quite fast. We got dropped by the bank, and I was being asked to do things. I still was thinking about leaving, but I was, quite busy at that time putting out fires. I would have liked to think with a clear head and me not dealing with trying to set up an IBE or open up accounts on Epstein's behalf, I would have certainly left working for him.
To the totality of your knowledge, both as your time working for Mr. Epstein and subsequently becoming a co-executor of his estate, was Jeffrey Epstein paid by individuals to traffic women to them?
Was he paid by individuals? Not that I'm, no.
You have a deep awareness of Mr. Epstein's finances and financial situation. Did any of his funds come from the trafficking of women?
No, not that I'm aware of.
And does Mr. Epstein have any unexplainable income in your time as his personal accountant?
No, I walked through today all of his income, and I know where it was sourced from. As I testified earlier, with certain clients, I was involved, especially Leon Black, but other clients, I was not involved, so I can't speak to the services he provided for those individuals. But I have no reason to believe that any of his income was earned in an improper fashion.
Okay, so there you have it. Some big moments from his deposition. I just have to say this. There'll be always a lot of talks when you focus on him and you focus on Darren Indyke. So again, we're going to do another episode about his testimony. We have the videotape there. Perjury, right? Perjury comes up a lot, right? Are they telling the truth? As I mentioned, if the committee believes that he committed or Indyke committed perjury, they can refer the matter to the DOJ for potential filing and prosecution. But I've said it before and I'll say it again, perjury can be notoriously hard to prove. Yes, if you have a black and white case where somebody testifies one way and you have definitive proof that's not true, you have to show that this was willful, right? It wasn't just a mistake, it was willful, they knew they were doing it. And it can be difficult to pinpoint exactly what Kahn knew or didn't know. Yes, we have a lot of documents here. Yes, that can be very substantial if there are emails, communications that would suggest otherwise, but perjury is not a slam dunk, and also becomes a separate political question whether the Department of Justice would even move forward with charges against anyone in the Epstein case, particularly against Richard Kahn. Now, I'm not saying that he wasn't telling the truth. I'm not saying that he was misrepresenting the truth. We just don't know. But again, I gave different options about what to take away from this. Either he was kept in the dark, he really didn't know about any of this, or, you know, is there something else going on here? But I will just say, this is good for the public to see with their own eyes his answers, to judge for themselves his answers. This is about transparency as we try to get a better understanding of Jeffrey Epstein and his inner workings. Now again, to be clear, Richard Kahn hasn't been charged with a crime. He hasn't been formally accused of a crime. What happens next with respect to his testimony, how it will be used, in what fashion, we'll wait and see. That's all we have for you right now here on Sidebar, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. And as always, please subscribe on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. You can also check us out on NBC's Peacock as well. If you want to follow me, X, Instagram, my News Nation show, Jesse Weber Live, Monday through Friday, 11 p.m. Eastern. See you next time, everybody.